Now, in chapter 8 of Political Treatise, Baruch Spinoza also does some extent talk about the weaknesses of aristocracy. I've said in another video that it tells us aristocracy it has advantages, especially over democracy. Not democracy, monarchy, sorry. But he also does tell us about its weaknesses. And some of the weaknesses he points out is that because people as humans, we are selfish and greedy by nature, then because this is a body of humans, there is always going to be competition for power, control, and influence. Some people might feel like they need to have more say than others, and some people may try to manipulate the system so that their way, the way they see things tends to be the ones that is adopted by everyone. And he says so. There is that. That's he sees it as a weakness that aristocracies tend to have, and he talks about the danger of power struggle. Like, in fact, he takes some time to talk about the number of people to have in the aristocratic form of government, because he says if you have too few, then you risk splitting the dominion. For example, he says if you have two people ruling, then there is a likelihood of them having this power struggle and maybe splitting, or one of the two overcoming the other, and then the dominion basically becoming a monarchy. And I think I was reading this part, and I remember me reading Herodotus' histories, where he talks about the Greek city-states, and I think a few of those used to have two rulers at the same time, basically kings ruling. Sometimes in theory they were considered to be equal, but in practical terms one usually tended to have more powers than the other. And I think that's the situation Baruch describes when he says when you have two to form the aristocratic council, even might call it. So then they are going to have a struggle and maybe split the union if the two of them are too strong in equal terms, or one of them is going to be like the more powerful than the other, and then basically it's a monarchy. He says if it's four, then the more people you add into this council, the less push and pull there is, because the less power each one of them has. In fact, he talks about having a number as large as 5,000 individuals, depending, of course, on the population. He does provide these on reasons why he is choosing particular numbers, using the size of the population, and then deciding on the amount of, or the number of people who should form part of the aristocratic council or government. Because he sees it as a weakness that, in fact, one thing he points out a lot is that even when you have a significant number of people are not equal in their mental capacity. Some people are smarter than others. Basically, that's what he says. And if you have like 10 people in the council, one of them might turn out to be very smart. And because they are very smart, then they are able to manipulate everybody. And then they have a huge influence. And then the dominion is to some extent a monarchy, because then this one person, because of the sharpness of their mind, they are able to basically rule. So he says to minimize that, if the larger number you have, then you are going to have more people who are smarter than the rest, of course. And that then reduces the chances of having an individual being like the person who has the final say. And then he talks about another weakness he mentions is that, and I think I've mentioned this in another video, that the dominion never reverts back to the multitude. Once the aristocrats are in place, then they are in place for basically, you might say forever, of course, not really forever, but nobody knows until when, basically. So there's no time when the multitude, the public, is called upon to be like, let's appoint new members to this body. These people remain in power, and in fact, the kind of aristocratic dominion that Baruch describes in this chapter is where these people now are able to elect replacements if there is need. So that's a weakness that is a weakness that the multitude then is kind of like cut off completely from having any say as far as public policy and how government is run goes. Yeah, so those are some of the disadvantages he mentions about aristocratic form of government.